Tuesday, December 15th, 2020. It's 11 a.m. This meeting is being held fully remotely in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts March 12, 2020 order, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 30A, Section 20. If I could ask Member Ekstrom, could you please do a roll call for the members in attendance?
Certainly. Let's see, Member Hollins. Mute.
She is here.
Member Wall.
Here.
Member Johnson Musad.
He is here. He's in the car.
Member Karen.
I don't see her.
Chair Proietti.
Here.
Member Ekstrom. Present. One, two.
Oh, I believe Member Karen is now here.
Member Karen.
Here now.
Thank you. Mayor, where you go?
She had been here. I do not see her now.
Member Johnson Musad, second call. I hear you're in the car.
Yep, he's on mute.
Yes.
Okay. We have a quorum. I've got everyone, yeah?
Yep. Okay, so I'll call the meeting to order at 11:02 a.m. We will do a session of public comment. If there is anyone on the line looking to comment, it's a small group, so please identify yourself and indicate that you'd like to comment. I'm not hearing anyone. Last call for public comment. Okay, so we will move into the agenda, which is a discussion of the decision on in-person learning that was made by the superintendent yesterday. That was Monday, the 14th of December. And Member Karen, I'd actually like to start with you. I'm going to try to proceed in a somewhat orderly way around what happened with the decision making here. And Member Karen, I'm wondering if you could recap for us just briefly your role on the GREAT team, and then also your role with the joint meeting of public safety, or the Health and Safety Committee and the GEA on Friday. And I know you don't like to be put on the spot, but I think that your input on this is relevant to how we get started.
Absolutely. Hold on, I was trying to get my headphones
Sure.
going, so I didn't just start some schooling going on down right here.
And that was the mayor indicating that she is here, Member Ekstrom.
Thank you.
So I was on the GREAT team, which was the large team. I think there were 25 of us or more, helping decide what plan we would like to propose to the school committee. So we proposed this plan that we've been working through, which is phased reopenings, really just trying to get our very most vulnerable children in and then working forward from there. Last week we met twice on the joint health and safety team. I think there's a fancy name for it, but I don't remember it at the moment.
That's okay.
The first conversation was really just talking about facts, that the numbers were going up. Everybody felt pretty confident that we could stay open. The first meeting, but we at that time scheduled a meeting for Friday. And by Friday, everybody was feeling less confident. Myself included. If you look at rapid numbers, they come out pretty quick, but they're not necessarily the same places and the same times. But it felt to me, and I would hate to speak for anybody, but in that conversation, that we were sort of okay with proceeding to try to get through the next 7 days of learning. There were more than that, but the number of in-classroom days was 7. And, kind of keeping a close day by day eye on it. It seems that the soonest the school committee could meet was Thursday. And that was about not just maybe needing to close in more of an emergent situation, but also adjusting our reopening timeline based on that the numbers are just rapidly going up. But on, the holidays are coming, and that's when we're sort of suspecting this spike is from the Thanksgiving holiday, and they're suspecting that we'll see another one from Christmas, and then even more from New Year's. And we won't actually have those numbers for approximately 2 weeks. One of the things that was really important when we were talking about the phasing in plan, and I'm sure all of you remember this, that the reality is that a spike is not noticeable for about 2 to 4 weeks, because that's how long the incubation time is. So it was a very divided group. We sort of came to a consensus that we didn't feel we needed to make an immediate recommendation. But I think at that time, anybody could have been swayed in either direction. It was just happening so fast. And we know the state numbers come out once a week, and that kind of felt like a lag. The superintendent did mention in that meeting that she does have the authority for an emergency closure, just like any other health and safety risk. She could make an emergency closure. And everybody in the meeting acknowledged that and seemed to feel comfortable with the fact that that may happen. But nobody was like, yeah, you should definitely consider doing that. And nobody was like, definitely don't do that. It was very like, okay, that could need to happen, and everybody feels okay with it. Not that this group is a decision making. I want to be clear. This group is just to talk about the facts, bring it forward, make sure that all parts of the group understand the facts as being presented, and then make a recommendation to the full committee, right? They're not a decision making group that would come to us. I feel like that kind of overviews everything we've talked about.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I am definitely open to more questions or
Sure.
clarifications. So
Sure. And then before we ask you a question or two or eight, I'd like to actually ask the mayor to talk a little bit about what has happened over, let's say, the last week, but particularly since that Friday meeting of the joint team with the Board of Health.
Friday meeting with the Board of Health?
Since the Friday meeting of the joint team, can you talk about what the decision was that was made by the Board of Health on Saturday?
Okay, I guess I'm trying to figure out what Friday meeting you're talking about, simply
Well,
because
that was
I
the
wasn't
meeting
on.
that Katie was just describing. That was
Oh,
Friday.
okay,
Yeah.
the great team.
Yep.
Okay, all righty. Well, thank you, Katie, for that, and I'll do what Amy asked, but then I do have a question for you apropos of what you just said. Just so you know, by the way, Katie, and for the benefit of the great team and others, probably the most accurate numbers for what's going on in the city will come out of the reports that we give on the city website on a daily basis, because while they are dependent on the Maven system, Maven does take at least 2 days to update unless they are experiencing some difficulty, which they've had a couple of times recently, technical difficulties. So if you're looking for the most accurate, up-to-date records, that's really where you go. And if you need to have Jen Hoffman interpret them for you, she'll be more than happy to do that for you. I say that over the state numbers for the simple reason that I don't know why they take a week. I think they probably know before a week. They just have set a timeline when they release numbers. So you're going to get your best numbers going forward from the city. I feel fairly confident in that. That's what we follow. They check Maven daily, they report on it daily. They typically know what's going on behind the scenes that has not hit Maven yet. So as it pertains to the schools, Jen can be your best resource on that. I was not aware that any of this was being discussed per se, other than I know that after we dealt with the athletic schedule, that we would obviously probably have to then discuss what we're going to do about remote learning if the numbers should continue to rise. And of course, in that week, they have continued to rise significantly. So I was not aware until Jennifer Hoffman called me on Saturday morning that the Board of Health was even meeting on this matter. As I understand it from Jennifer, she was more or less directed, which is not her job, through an ask by the superintendent to call a Board of Health meeting so that they could make a recommendation. The Board of Health.
I want to just clarify. Are you saying that after the meeting on Friday of the joint team, there was a request, or at that meeting, there was a request from the superintendent for the Board of Health to convene?
I don't know when that request was made per se.
Okay.
I don't know. Jennifer, Katie, can you confirm that Jennifer was on the great team meeting or no?
It's not actually the great team. The great team was the original team. This is a joint health and safety team.
Oh, right. I did see a reference to that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's from the negotiations and the contract negotiations. This was an agreed upon part that we would meet once cases hit a certain level.
Yes, I get it.
Also, I did mention in that meeting that the mayor's Facebook page or wherever, I don't remember what exact wording, puts up much more current numbers.
Okay.
We looked at those, we looked at the state numbers, and we also looked at like this other one on the New York Times. We looked at a bunch of maps. So we didn't try to only use one set of information. Jennifer was not at that meeting on Friday. She was also not at the one on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Yeah,
okay,
I don't know if she was invited or not, but she was, I believe she just was unable to make it, but I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, and I don't either. So at some point in time, after that, must have been after that meeting, she was asked by Jordana to have a Board of Health meeting outside of their normal meeting times to help her come to a decision on what to do about closing schools. As far as I know, that's all she was asking. She didn't give her any details. Jennifer said that she would have to discuss with the Board of Health in order to find a meeting time. There was, I think, some urgency in her mind to Jordana's request. So it turned out that there are actually now 3 members of the Board of Health. They are Alyssa Valbona, Kelly Dixon, and Nancy Bershoff, Dr. Nancy Bershoff, who is the chair of the meeting, of the board, rather. Nancy was unable to meet either Thursday or Friday. Apparently, Kelly may have had a conflict. Alyssa was not available one of those days, but she was available other days. So it came to pass that they decided to meet on Saturday morning. They met on, I still am not aware of any of this because I trust my boards and I certainly trust Jennifer, and I assume that she was acting, she does report directly to me. She was acting out of her sense of duty to her role as interim health director, and also the person who is our go-to person on all things COVID. And she has been in that position since since we started dealing with this in March of this year, February, March of this year. So they met at 11, I think it was at 10 o'clock. At approximately 11 or a little after, she called me to let me know that the Board of Health had made their recommendation, and that she felt like she knew that she needed to let me know this before sending it to Jordana, because I think she was aware that I really wasn't aware that they were meeting. So she told me what the recommendation was, and I said to her, well, I, both as a school committee member and as mayor, have a little bit of trouble with your recommendation, or the Board of Health's recommendation, but I will back your recommendation to the school committee because you are the Board of Health, or they are the Board of Health. But I can't guarantee, I said, it is not your decision to close the schools. It's not, in this circumstance, Jordana's decision to close the schools. Ultimately, it is the school committee's decision to do that. And I said, I can't guarantee you, because of my particular reservations, I can't guarantee you that when it comes time for the school committee to vote, that I will vote in favor of it. So I just want you to know that. But I won't know that until we meet. And we have a meeting next week. At that point, I didn't know exactly when the meeting was. I knew it wasn't going to be on a Wednesday because I'm busy doing fire stations, as is Jean Wall, coming Wednesday. So she said, well, then I should call Jordana, right? And I said, yes, absolutely. She's asked you to do this. You've done it. She needs you to report on it. It is a Saturday, so by all means, call her, and I hope she returns your call sometime, in a timely way. But also follow up by email, which she did. Jennifer did. So it was not until 10 o'clock yesterday morning that Jennifer heard from her. I don't remember exactly what that conversation centered around, other than Jordana wanted her to know that at some point during the day, she would be making a decision and conveying it to the community on school closures. Jennifer has no reason to believe, or had no reason at that time, that Jordana would not consult with the school committee or the chair. So I mean, she just, she's not a player in terms of the school committee isn't,
Sure.
up on all of that.
I think that's
she said fine.
I think that's probably a good summary, Mayor.
Okay, I was just going to address
Please.
later in the afternoon when she asked Jennifer to sign the letter. If you want me to do that now,
yes,
I will.
Thank you. No, go ahead. That's perfect.
So, again, as I say, Jennifer's new to Greenfield municipal structure, and to a certain extent, the politics behind it and the dynamics behind it. So at some point in the afternoon, not too long before Jennifer sent it out, before Jordana sent it out, superintendent sent it out, Jennifer received a call from the superintendent basically saying very urgently, I need you to sign on this letter with me. Now, she most definitely is not authorized to ask unilaterally without letting me know that to have Jennifer or any member of the Board of Health to sign a letter. Jennifer said, well, I wouldn't sign it because really it needs to come from the chair of the Board of Health. She said, now I'm happy to reach out to Nancy or have her call you to discuss it. Apparently Nancy was unavailable and Jordana had a great sense of urgency about wanting to be able to release the letter. I have now seen the email that circulated asking from Jordana, which I didn't have the benefit yesterday when I spoke, or last night when I spoke to Jennifer, but I've now seen it where she was asking various members of the Board of Health to comment on it. I think Kelly was the only one who weighed in. But I just want it to be very clear that Jennifer did not want to sign it. To my knowledge, she may never have given authority to Jordana to put her name on it, but I vaguely remember from my 10 p.m. conversation with last night with Jennifer that she said finally gave in because Nancy wasn't available. So she was reluctant to sign because she didn't think it was part of her role to do so.
Okay.
And that's
And
that.
okay, I appreciate that.
Sorry, it was a long story, but
No, that's fine.
I wanted to
So
make sure it was clear.
you've brought us up to the basically chronologically the point at which I got a notification yesterday. The time on the email is 3:43 p.m. The superintendent asked if I would support the letter going out and the closing, immediate closing of the in-person learning. And I was charging my phone and did not see any of that until almost 5 o'clock. I wasn't looking at my phone at the time. And the next email that she sent me was just after 4:15. So about a half hour to 40 minutes later, indicating that the letter was going out and she was about to notify families that we were halting in-person learning. And there was an immediate response from member Ekstrom, Vice Chair Ekstrom, that likely was not the superintendent's role, but all the notification had already gone out. So we are here now on Tuesday morning, and that all transpired basically between the meeting of the joint committee on Friday afternoon and yesterday and right now. And I would like to pause at this point. We kind of have the full story. The superintendent is not here. She was unavailable today. We do have the full story of how this kind of transpired from a few different angles. I would like to give an opportunity for school committee members to ask questions or add to the discussion in any way that they feel is relevant. At this point, I do not see the need yet for any sort of motion, but when we evolve to a point where I think it's important to make a motion, I will stop the discussion and ask for that. I think, Mayor, did you had your hand up before I called on you to speak. Did you have a question for member Karen before we open it to other questions?
I did, and at the moment, it does not seem to want to make itself known
Okay.
yet
Okay.
in my brain. It went in one ear and out the other. So maybe other questions will spur me to understand what my question was.
Okay. So other school committee members, please. I see member Ekstrom raising her hand. Go ahead.
Well, I guess I'm curious, Katie, did Jordana give any additional background as to why it was she felt she could make this decision on her own? Because I've been in multiple meetings during negotiations with her, and she has been very clear that there is no movement can be made from one phase to another without a meeting of the school committee and the school committee's approval or rendering a decision. And she has said this multiple times. So I'm a little bit surprised to have heard her say, "Well, I can make this decision independently in case of an emergency." And I guess it's a two-part question. The other question is, if the school committee, if the meeting that was being called for the school committee was presumably to discuss going back to we're getting rid of in-person learning and everyone returning to remote learning.
Yeah, those are good clarifying questions. Though it sounded to me, and I don't necessarily disagree with the superintendent on this point, and actually, anyway, I'll say what I have to say and then I'll back it up with some evidence. It sounded to me that it's not a move back to phase one. It's a temporary halt while we reevaluate the true state of things at the moment based on significant change in an emergent fashion. I don't think I think that the reason that she felt comfortable making a rapid fire decision, and it's really unfair of me to speak for her, but the way it felt to me at the time was that this was an emergency. And in an emergency case, she would have to make that call, and we would try to meet to back up that call or whatever, but it made more sense to make that call than to make a mistake. Now, yesterday, for information sharing, I believe Member Holland sent out the guidelines on how we base closures. And if you read all the way through them, at first glance, it seems like this was a completely not the right way to go. You know, if you read it, there's a lot of things like the reason to close a school is if there are cases in a school or a suspected large number of cases, on and on and on. But if you read down on that form, it actually says that in case of significant municipal outbreak as determined by the local board of health or DPH, the superintendent and school leaders must consult with the local board of health to determine whether it is appropriate. The part that's missing, and I don't know because she's not here to ask, is that it says you must consult with DESE for further guidance. I don't know how that happened or didn't happen. But to me, the question is, why did she think that if she had the ability to do that? And to me, it felt like she felt that in an emergency situation, she is allowed to make a call like that for any reason, not just a municipal outbreak, but if there was a significant health risk at any building. She makes these calls all the time, and this felt like an extension of that. And that she wasn't moving us back to phase one. And the meeting on Thursday wasn't to pull children out of into only remote learning. It was just to push back the start date. That was going to be sort of what the recommendation from the Joint Health and Safety Committee was, that we are currently planned to restart phase instruction on January 4th. And we were going to recommend that we actually not start till the 11th, just so we had more time. It wasn't
remember, Karen?
Yeah.
Just to clarify, you're talking about when you say the meeting on Thursday.
I mean, the
meeting
sure we were going to hold.
That loop. Yes, that it was requested after the conclusion of your meeting, the joint meeting on Friday, that we hold a school committee meeting this week sometime. And on Friday evening around 7 p.m., waiting until Thursday evening of this week, which would be whatever day, the 17th, was an acceptable timeline.
Correct.
And then somehow yesterday, that acceptable timeline changed. And that's kind of what we're trying to get at, is what exactly happened. And yes, I appreciate it is impossible for us to speak for the superintendent when she is not here. We're just trying to establish what facts are available. Thank you. Did you want to add anything else? Because I interrupted you.
I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Glenn. I have 1 minute before I have to go. I guess I just wanted to make.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to make one comment, which is that it really does sound like at any point in this, the superintendent could have communicated to this school committee that she was asking the Board of Health to meet. We could have attended the meeting, you know. In other words, there has been some, updates for us about the COVID case numbers and so on by email. But then there were a lot of events that happened without an email to us, so that there were a lot of steps taken that we weren't aware of. So I guess that's just a concern that I have hearing this timeline.
I appreciate that. I'm sorry that you won't be able to stay with us for the whole meeting. Please come back if you're able to after your appointment. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
And Katie, I did interrupt you, so if you weren't done, please finish whatever it is you were discussing.
I think I said it all. I was starting to ramble a little bit, so thank you.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
sure. Thank you. Other comments and discussion from the school committee? I see Member Hollins and then Mayor Wiedegartner, please.
I didn't know any of this background at all. All I knew was, so I appreciate the clarification. I'm not comfortable talking about why the superintendent did anything. I think that's up for the superintendent, but I am comfortable talking about what I did when I first got this. And I just want to mention the superintendent sent all of us a long record explaining what she did and why she did it. So that's a record, I think, about calling the school off. But what I did is I haven't been following this closely because everyone else in the whole world is following this. But I'm just confused that we're flip-flopping a little bit on who closes the schools. At our last meeting, a fact is we talked about sports for this season, winter season, and I made the motion that absent some state guideline, because we have to follow state guidelines, rulings, that we would go ahead, leaving the decision to the superintendent, following whatever superintendent guidelines there are. And the superintendent, I recall at our meeting, didn't feel comfortable with that and wanted the decisions to come back to the school committee. So the motion was changed by the chair that if there was going to be a change, it would come back to the school committee. So the whole situation confuses me because we just had a meeting where I think, based on the superintendent's concerns, that these decisions would come back to the school committee. But secondly, I'm also unclear how many school nurses we currently employ and how many children are in each of the schools. I was under the impression that all of our nurses are still employed and that we have a very small number of students in each school, that this is just, that what's going on is the very neediest students who cannot learn on their own are the first in, and it may be as small as less than 10 students in a school. So what I did, I'd just like to go to source documents. I did go to the state to just check that, yes, the governor, I figured out the law that he can do an emergency, something, close the school. And I looked up on the DESI website, the specific guidelines for school closure, the protocol, which I hadn't looked up before, to be honest. And it seemed pretty clear to me that the guideline for everybody in the state is that whether or not you're going to close the school once you have students in it is based on the school nurse advising whether or not it is likely that having the children in school will contribute to transmission. And I started thinking about that. And then if you think it is, and you share that information with the Department of Health, and if there is a decision to close a school, then it has to be reviewed by DESI, who's pressing us not to close schools, I think. So I was surprised to see that there's very clear guidance on the state website about how schools can be closed, that it isn't based on it. It's triggered, the decision thinking is triggered by either an increased outbreak. I'm just quoting DESI guidelines, I'm no authority on this. The decision of whether or not to close school once children are in it is triggered, the discussion, either by an outbreak of a student or a staff member in the school, someone being tested positive, or an increase in the incidence of COVID in your community. And that triggers the school nurse, as I read the guidelines, evaluating and giving an opinion, a public health opinion, because school nurses work under public health. If there's a likely risk of transmission, giving that opinion to the Department of Public Health. And then the school leaders in the Department of Public Health confer, and if they agree that there's a likely risk of transmission, they give that info to the DESI. So it isn't my impression that these decisions are made. It is my impression that there's a really clear protocol from the state. And yes, superintendents have the ability to close schools, absent a directive from the state that to the contrary would be my opinion. I don't understand why we're not following the state's clearly posted guidance on school closing? That's my question, and I just think we should be following that.
Okay.
And also, I did have a question of who is Jennifer? I don't know that, and who's on this joint committee? Thank you.
Sure. So Jennifer Hoffman is the interim
Oh,
director
okay,
of
got
public
it.
health
I didn't know.
for the city of Greenfield. And Katie, are you able to give us who is on the
Yes.
committee? Thanks.
Let me just, I don't want to leave anybody out, so let me pull up the invite list. Hold on. There we go. It is, oh, that's not what I want to do. There's Garrett, I believe his last name is O'Brien, is invited to these meetings. Janet Dickinson is invited to the meetings. Jennifer Hoffman, Jennifer Schott, she is our physician contact. Karen Patnode, Melanie Goodwin, Michael Sustick, and the superintendent. And most important, not most importantly, but right at the top of that list is Pam Owen, our
Thank
lead
you.
nurse.
Yes, I was waiting for that name.
Yeah,
Owen is
she was the one
lead
who
nurse.
sent the list, so
Yeah.
she was not on the list because she sent it. But yes, she is there.
Jennifer Schott attended the meeting?
Yes, she did.
And she is the superintendent in an email referenced her as our school physician.
I believe that is her title, yes.
But she doesn't, is she employed, do you know if she's employed full-time by the district? I should know that, and I don't think that she is.
I do not believe that she is. It's more of
The stipend.
a stipend, and she does work for us like this, like
okay.
consulting on these types of things, or if the lead nurse needs consultation, that's who she contacts.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, discussion? Member Ekstrom, go ahead.
Just to clarify the members of the Joint Labor Management Safety Committee, this was a group that came out of negotiations with the GEA and MTA, or the MTA advising the GEA. And the GEA brought it to us and was an easy yes for us. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer, but so that everyone's aware of who is to be on this team, the parties shall form a joint labor management safety committee composed of a school committee member, the superintendent, the school physician, one a unit A and one C member, the district nurse leader, and the Greenfield Board of Health director to meet as needed basis to review current COVID information through the lens of student and staff safety in conducting in-person learning, and aim to identify indicators of community transmission and distinguish such phenomena from clusters. Incidents that are contained in special population is key. Then any cluster of COVID-19 in GPS community, Greenfield or Franklin County have more than 8 new cases per 100,000 over a 14-day period. Any proposed changes between learning models / phases. The JLMSC shall advise the school committee on health and safety concerns and whether to transition to full remote phase. So this is the reason that the Joint Labor Management Safety Committee exists. God, I'm having a hard time talking. But also, Amy, was there anyone else at the meeting other than those listed?
You mean Katie?
Yes,
sorry, Katie.
Paul DeMarco was in attendance at both of those meetings.
Okay.
So I want to make it clear that we and while this may seem like a indirect line, during negotiations, we made it clear that there would not be a member of the MTA at any of those meetings. And so I want to make that clear, and there is sort of an immediate line for me based on that.
Okay.
But Member Hollins, you had asked who it was on the team, and so I wanted to give you that information.
Yeah. And I think that piece is kind of, we have to set that aside for now. That's not part of this.
I understand.
So I have a question, but I want to see if there's other questions, comments, discussion. Mayor Rita Gardner, please go ahead.
So I did remember my question to Katie, and I think, well, I'm actually not sure that Pat has gotten a clear answer, and intendant is not on this meeting, but I'm curious, Katie, as to why she thought it was necessary to make a 3-day closure at basically 3 days from today is whatever it is. I don't know if it takes us through Friday even. Why she thought that versus waiting for the school committee to meet, understanding that we would meet.
I think that's why we're here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something changed because
So
she was
something
okay
changed.
It appeared satisfactory on Friday
Yeah.
evening that we wait until Thursday, the 17th, to meet
Yeah.
as a school committee. Something
Yeah.
changed. I don't have any indication. I was hoping to hear one of the school committee members or more indicate that there was a communication with the superintendent yesterday before she contacted me by email at 3:45 in the afternoon. Did anyone speak with her about anything related to this decision yesterday?
It's important for me to say that one of those school committee members myself was not, where she's involving our Board of Health and our health director. I was never contacted at any point. I was around all day yesterday. I would have been happy to either take a phone call or read the email. It is my understanding from somewhere, perhaps it's even in an email, that she is doing this with the full support of the mayor. I was very clear with Jennifer that I backed the Board of Health's recommendation, emphasis on the word recommendation. That's all they do at this stage of the game. But that I would not necessarily, as a school committee member, vote until I had heard all the discussions. So I was certainly never contacted. What changed? It's perhaps, I mean, we are seeing a rapid increase, but I don't think that it is the type of increase that isn't being handled by the people that it's supposed to be handled by, which is our healthcare people. That we needed to have a 3-day closure before we met on this day, or I'm sorry, before we meet on Thursday. So that's the piece that's curious to me
Okay,
on this
thank you. Thank you.
as
Just
well.
in terms of contacting, I did not get reached out to ask questions or anything, but I did get forwarded the recommendation from the. I got an email that said that the Board of Health had been recommending it, and it was a forward of some kind. I did not get asked any questions or anything, and it was at like 3:45. So it was before you received anything, Chair, but not much.
And who forwarded that to you? Madam Chair?
Let me pull it up for sure so I don't misspeak here. I got a email from superintendent, and it's a forward. I believe it's a forward of an email you received actually. When you
So,
received it, I don't
yeah,
know.
she contacted me yesterday. It was 3:43.
Yeah, it's that
Yeah.
I got forwarded that same email.
She forwarded it to you. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Further questions, discussion?
Just to follow up, I did not receive any communication.
Okay.
This is Member Ekstrom.
Okay. We don't know about Glenn, but I'm going to guess he would have mentioned it if he talked to the superintendent yesterday, but I'll say that we don't know for sure.
Member
So,
Hollins or Member Wall, did you receive any communication?
Member Hollins is shaking her head no.
I received the same one that Katie received at 3 whatever that time.
Okay. Thank you.
I just received the.
Go ahead. That's fine. Member Hollins, go ahead.
No, I just received an email that went to the whole school committee, maybe.
Okay. Okay. So what do we need or want to do at this point as a school committee? Member Hollins, go ahead.
I still would appreciate, if it's not irrelevant, understanding how many children we're talking about. I
Sure.
think the notice
You did
went out
ask
to the
about
entire
that.
school district,
It did.
but am I correct that there are fewer than, that there's only like 5 to 10 children plus their staff in each school? That would be helpful to me, understanding what to do,
Yeah, I did
or
not.
if there's anything to do.
You had asked about that, and I did not get exact numbers. I do know.
But just generally,
Yeah, there's a total district-wide, there are 39 students spread across the 6 schools. I think the number that you said, 5 to 10, is accurate for, I would imagine, all but the high school. I think there's probably a handful more at the high school.
could I ask one more question?
Of course.
Does this 3-day closure mean that 3 days are added on to the school calendar? Because I noticed that the notice went out to the entire school district. I just saw that on a GPS alert on my phone.
Well,
But
so
could anyone explain how this affects the school calendar
the only change, it doesn't affect the school calendar because
for
the
a
students that were
piece
going in
of
person are now
education?
remote. They're attending remote as they had been until 2 weeks ago.
The 39?
Right. They're still getting instruction. They've just gone back to a remote structure for that instruction.
Okay, thank you for that.
Sure. And then I can read the notice that went out at 4:39 p.m. to all families in the district, or anyone actually who signs up for the GPS alerts. Anyone can get them. Based on new Board of Health recommendations, GPS will temporarily pause phase 2 in-person services effective immediately. Please check GPS email. So that's what went out to families, everyone, and anyone who signed up for that list. I have not received any indication of the definition of temporary. I think that's another concern that I have. I don't know what the intent is for a temporary pause. I don't know if that means that there was an anticipation that the school committee would hold a meeting this coming Thursday, the 17th, 2 days from now, as we had planned last Friday, to discuss, and that perhaps in-person learning would resume. And I also think it could be referencing temporarily because there's been a number of discussions, including at that joint committee, about the January timeline, and if it meant pausing in-person learning until we decide to go back in January. I can't remember if that's the 4th or the 11th. I've seen both dates.
Well, according to the letter Jordana sent, this
That's
wasn't a
the letter
3-day
to
pause.
families.
Right.
The letter,
This wasn't yes. This isn't a 3-day pause. It says, at this time, we anticipate that the pause will continue through at least January 8th of 2020. That
Okay.
is not 3 days.
Okay. But we have received email communication since yesterday, when this communication went out, that it is a 3-day pause. Am I correct?
Yeah.
I feel like we have, and that's where I'm just concerned.
I remember reading that somewhere in the
So many
superintendent
emails.
response. I think I recall that.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess that's kind of, I think we're at the point now. We've discussed all of the details. The timelines are clear. The communication that exists is clearly outlined. What I'll ask again, what do we do at this point? I'm not convinced that this decision was handled in a way that is meets with the guidelines from the state, meets with the expectations of the school committee that are outlined in our remote learning plan. And it certainly is opposite of the precedent we have set since March for making decisions about the school calendar and instruction and what type of instruction students would be receiving, and is on the heel of the decision that happened last Wednesday, where it was clearly stated in any number of ways that the decisions around these things come to the school committee, and that did not happen. So I think we need to do something to move forward in a way that is, number one, best for our students, but number two, and I think almost as equally as important, protects the integrity of how we go about our business on behalf of our students and families. And that has not happened here. And coming out of this meeting, somehow rectifying that, I think, is really important to me. Member Wall, and then Mayor Wiedegartner, and then Member Hollins.
And I guess I just want to be perfectly satisfied that COVID does not exist at this moment in the school system among the children and the staff that are there. I mean, I would not want to proceed if anyone were in danger of catching COVID. And
Thank
so,
you, Jean. Yes, absolutely. Mayor Wiedegartner.
I'd like to address that. It wasn't what I was originally going to say, but I'll address that. There is no such thing, and I mean this very sincerely. It is not hyperbole. There is no such thing as perfectly satisfied that there is no COVID or no ability to get COVID within our schools. It cannot be done. It can happen in a heartbeat. It can happen because people don't report it. It could happen. There is no such thing as being perfectly satisfied with that. As much as we want to be, we've been dealing with this since March. That is why the rapid increase is so important. Just in the terminology that we used in the emergency management portion of my work here, when we say we have increases in COVID, that can mean we have them in special populations. It could be nursing homes. It could be certain church groups that don't abide by the rules, and so forth. When we say it is in the community, those aren't idle words. That means that now it is being spread throughout the community in ways that you don't really know. People have said, I abide, I wear my mask, I only go out if I have to, I don't do this, I don't do that, and still they get COVID. So I can't use that as a standard, and I'm perfectly satisfied that. I'm hoping we won't. What I wanted to say was I agree with Amy and 100% that I think we have to make a decision today. The decision that we have to make is whether to totally override the superintendent's letter, in which case now we've created a situation of chaos for our parents and our students, because they don't know which way to go. I will say that is not our doing. That is the doing of the superintendent for having made the decision that she made fairly unilaterally. Because even though we have the DESE guidelines and there is a policy of sorts that states that the superintendent can make emergency closures, it's probably unwritten but understood in that statement that superintendents generally don't do that without some consultation and waiting for consultation, especially in these days when everybody it's difficult to reach people. But it's done in consultation with the school committee. So I think we definitely have to protect the integrity of the school committee and their ability. And as Amy says, practice of what we've been doing since March.
A question, Mayor?
Is that Katie asking a
Yes,
question?
it
Oh,
is.
okay.
For me, in my decision of what to do next, it's really important to me about the Board of Health recommendation and where it's coming from. And I don't feel like I have a lot of information about why they made that recommendation. Do you have any more information you could give? I know you didn't help make that recommendation,
Yeah.
but as far as we know at the moment, we do not have any cases in schools. I mean, we'll never know all the time, but
No.
you know, like those simple kind of questions are lingering in my mind before I decide what to do next.
I think it was, it had to do with their knowledge, and particularly Jennifer's knowledge of the ongoing and now daily increase. For weeks, months, we would go for days without any increase. As of about 2.5 to 3 weeks ago, we have seen increases daily. And we know, and by the way, I do want to stress this. we are on our first day of testing. We are doing a citywide two-day event today and tomorrow. We have 600 people being tested today. We have 600 people tomorrow. We will follow along very shortly thereafter with the state's program because we have been designated a site. So when I say fairly shortly thereafter, they want to have it up and running by the end of this month. You are going to see increased cases. When you test, you increase. That's just the way it is. That's a good thing because now we know who they are, who they've been in contact with, and so forth and so on. So that's not despite what the current president of the United States says, that is not a bad thing. But it can be an alarming thing because I think we're going to see increases. So
Sure.
to answer your question, I think what happened was a combination of their knowledge of the increases, and Jennifer did share with me that they had a concern about the particular population that will be in remote learning. That concern, I think, came from...
Not remote learning, but in-person learning.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
In-person learning. Sorry about that. As not always able to be compliant. And when I say compliant, I mean with masks,
Sure.
with, they have certain physical issues that cause a lot of fluids and cognitive issues that causes them not to fully understand a whole lot. We know a whole lot of things. And it was their concern. They were trying to respond to that concern for the teachers. I don't know if that came from Jordana or if there was somebody representing teachers and aides that expressed that specific concern about the population.
That point did come
curious.
up. That point did come
Okay.
up in our joint meeting that, you know, this particular population is at risk for non-compliance, but not even that. They're also just often have medical needs that
Yeah.
make them more at risk for being seriously ill.
Yeah. So that would be my guess on why they made that recommendation. But because they're always, in my opinion, always going to err more strongly on the side of the health effects, and maybe not think quite so much about how this is going to affect parents who are now planning their lives around their children being in schools, there's no such thing right now as getting back to normal, but, being able to say, well, okay, at least, John or Sally or whoever is going to be in school for a certain amount of time, and I can either resume work for those hours or I can take a much needed break, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that that's our job. We have to think more broadly about who's involved.
Okay. Thank you. And Member Holland, you've been waiting very patiently. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. Chair Prietti, you mentioned two issues you thought we needed to address: what's best for students and personnel, and some way of protecting the integrity of district decision-making. But for me, there's a third one.
Please.
It seems to me that the issue is really confused of what's the protocol, what's the role of our nurses, the superintendent, the state. So I think I can make a motion about the third issue is the confusion going forward, if you like.
Please.
So I'd like to move that in order to alleviate confusion and assure collaboration and thoughtful decision-making by Greenfield committees addressing COVID, that the DESE protocol for school closing be shared with the Joint Committee, the school health personnel, and the Board of Health, and that we assure all communications be as clear and non-alarmist as possible.
That's our motion. Do we have a second?
What was it?
Sure, I'll second.
Was that was Member
Ekstrom.
Ekstrom, I believe?
Yep.
And Susan Farber,
And
do you have the motion?
I'll send it. I just wanted to say that my reason for this is I think starting now, we really need to make sure everybody's got the clear state guidance on what to do.
Sure. Do you have it written somewhere that you can actually send it to Susan Farber?
I want to do that right now.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Let's have a discussion. Member Ekstrom, please.
I wonder if we need to add something along the lines, or if there should be another motion that states that any changes in teaching style must be approved or reviewed by the school committee. Because what we're talking about is essentially there was a recommendation made, and the recommendation was acted upon by a single person, as opposed to the full committee who could have taken under guidance. And I don't know that we would have made any decision differently. However, we don't have the full information in front of us, and this is a single person having made this decision. And so I think maybe that's more so at the heart of this. A recommendation was made and a decision made by a single person, as opposed to the full committee's discussion and review. I can't imagine in any way, shape, or form that anyone on the committee would want to endanger anyone's health or well-being. But there are multiple parameters which we spoke about that would measure that. Now, had we made the decision, if we don't have any COVID positive in the schools, which we did have I will remind everyone, we did have a teacher that was positive, that was teaching in her room by herself, had no contact with other people. So yes, that case could be made. And with numbers rising, and I realize that DESE has said you need to have X number of cases, or there needs to be cases within your classrooms or in your district. However, given all of the information, it seems to me that it would be likely that the school committee as a whole would have said, yes, we need to return to virtual teaching only. But that was taken out of our hands by a singular person. So, okay. And just wanting to follow up, did someone say next 3 days? Yes, the email that the superintendent sent to me and the rest of the school committee was addressed to me. It said, to clarify, my decision pertains to the next 3 days only and is only a temporary clause until the school committee convenes, which is not how I read that letter, personally.
Well, and no dates were discussed with anyone before we received that communication from her.
That is true. Before everyone received that communication.
Right. So I want to see Member Hollins, if there's anyone else. Go ahead, Member Hollins.
I just want to say, I thought I sent this to Susan Farber, but it may have gone to more people than that, and I quickly wrote it without editing, but.
That's okay. Okay. Member Wall, you have your microphone off mute. Were you interested in speaking? Okay. Anyone else? So we do have a motion on the table, and I think it makes sense to have that, since there's no further discussion, have that read back to us and see if we want to, how we would like to act on it. Susan Farber, go ahead.
Yes. The motion is that in order to alleviate confusion and assure collaboration and thoughtful decision-making by Greenfield committees addressing COVID, that the DESE protocol for school closing be shared with the Joint Committee, school health personnel, and Board of Health, and that we assure all communications be as non-alarmist as possible.
Okay, so that's the motion we have. Any further discussion before we vote on that?
Yes.
Go ahead. Mayor Rita Gardner, is that you?
Is that going to be the only motion that comes out of this meeting? Because
I can't
I don't
imagine that it
think,
would be.
okay, I don't think it addresses the
I was just,
unilateral decision-making.
Yeah, no, I
That's
think
the part.
we need to
I was
proceed
just
a little
trying
bit
to,
systematically. Yeah.
I was just trying to address the confusions about all of this going forward, and I meant to include the school administrators.
Did you want to make an amendment to your motion?
Yes, I'd like to amend it to include the school administrators and the people who should get the DESE protocol.
The DESE guidance, yeah. Susan Farber, if you could add that, that would be helpful. And then as long as Susan Ekstrom is okay with that friendly amendment as she was your second, we'll move forward.
That's fine.
Okay.
Got it.
Thank you. And it sounds like we're ready for a roll call vote on this. Member Ekstrom, would you do that, please?
Certainly. Member Hollins.
Yes.
Member Wall.
Yes.
Member Johnson Musad departed at 11:30, so he will not be voting, I assume. Member Karen.
Yes.
Chair Poyetti.
Yes.
Mayor Weedy Gardner.
Yes.
Vice Chair Ekstrom, yes, we are unanimous.
Thank you.
Did Jean Wall get to vote? I missed it.
She did.
Oh, okay.
She did.
Yes, she did. It was unanimous. Okay. Mayor Rita Gardner, is there a motion you want to make related to your concern that we need to do more?
No, I mean, if you give me a few minutes, I might be able to come up with one.
Okay.
I was just suggesting that needs to be addressed.
Sure, sure. And so I think we should work on that now. Does anyone else have a thought on, and we can just discuss, but if you have a thought on a motion to move forward, that would certainly be a way we could start the discussion.
I'll make a motion.
Member Ekstrom, go ahead.
Motion to motion that the school committee be fully informed. All recommendations for phase changes in the plan or alterations to the plan must be approved by the school committee.
Okay.
What do we think of that?
The motion is all recommendations of changes to our COVID, what did we call it? The remote learning plan? Is that a better thing?
Yeah.
So the remote learning plan be, did you say approved by the school committee?
Yes.
Susan Farber, do you have what you need?
Does that make sense?
It also said, and alterations to the plan.
Does that make sense? Does it get at what we're trying to?
I think and alterations to the plan is probably bigger than what we want to chew on right now. Only because there was the great team was, and there was a larger group of people that created that plan.
Right.
I was just restating what Susan Ekstrom said.
Thank you. It's kind of a motion that's in progress, so I appreciate that.
And did it get a second?
Not yet. No.
Okay.
Still trying to decide if that's what it should be.
Well, that's okay, because we can start with that, and if that's not what it's going to be, we can amend it.
This is Susan Farber. Can I read back now what I have?
Please, go ahead.
Okay. The motion is that all recommendations of changes to the remote learning plan be approved by the school committee.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
And I think it's must be approved by the school committee.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, who seconded that, please?
That was Member Hollins,
I will second.
and that was the
Oh.
mayor, so you can take your
Oh.
pick.
That's fine. I second
It
it.
would help if we remember Member Johnson Massad's advice that for these remote meetings, if you second, that you state your name along with the
Yes.
second.
Thank you.
Thanks for helping me keep track.
Thank you.
I mean, my intention is that the superintendent not make this decision, any decision on her own. Or their
I
own,
hear
I should
that.
say.
Here's my concern is I don't know that the motion clearly addresses what actually happened, which was the superintendent doing an emergency closure, and it appears believing that she was acting within her authority. And I think we need to address the emergency closure piece of this somehow, either in a separate motion or with an amendment to this motion.
It could be a different motion. It doesn't matter to me.
Right, and that's fine. We can always throw a motion out. And maybe we need to address it. Maybe it's separately and separate enough that we need a third motion later. I'm not sure. Member Hollins, go ahead.
I think we can't change the fact that a superintendent has authority to close schools in, for weather, for some emergency reason, the roof falls in, there's a fire. But I'm not clear if with state posted COVID guidelines on school closing, if that, how that weighs in with the superintendent's authority. I'm not clear on that. I would think in this situation, it would require us to follow the state guidelines, but I'm not sure. It's a legal question, really.
Maybe that's
helpful to be clear on that.
Motion. Maybe our motion should be more about following state guidelines for any school closure.
Particularly related to COVID.
Member Ekstrom, your thoughts on that? So either getting rid of that motion and starting new with, I move that during the COVID response of the district, we follow state guidelines for school closures or for in-person learning closures, cancellations, what have you.
So I do have some
And that's the motion. What?
I have some reservations about adding that or altering it to reflect state recommendations or directives because, and as has been pointed out to me multiple times, the state doesn't necessarily put into action what they are telling us to do, and so the format in which they ask for or tell us to do things isn't really a practical application.
That's a really good point, because we also, in terms of our own integrity, want to make sure that we are following our precedent, and we are cognizant of the fact that we've had to take an infinite number of steps without state guidance or support that was relevant during this pandemic response. So I do appreciate that. So let's stay with the motion that we have on the table. Susan Farber, would you read that to us again? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And I do have concerns about the current reading, the current wording, if I may, because it says that recommendations of changes must be approved. But I think what's meant is that the actual changes.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are other boards and bodies that would make recommendations, for example.
Sure.
Right.
If you could read it to us, we'll try to fix it.
Okay, so if we remove that, it says, all changes to the remote learning plan must be approved. But then there was some discussion of that the remote learning plan wasn't it. The great team and others have a say in that.
Correct.
So is it the remote learning phases?
That's closer.
That plan was approved by the school committee, so that makes it the school committee's plan. And
Right.
changes of that plan, the school committee's authority, because we've adopted that plan as our plan, I would say.
But we don't want to get a position where we're saying it's okay for us to make changes to it without consulting with the folks that helped put it together.
So maybe the motion shouldn't be about the plan.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yes, and I think that's what we're looking to do. So if we remove the plan, Susan Farber, is it an actual motion?
The motion as it is now, all changes to the remote learning phases must be approved by the school committee.
And that was a motion from, who made the motion?
Member Ekstrom, seconded by the mayor.
Seconded by the
I don't
mayor.
know if we want to make it remote.
I think there's a part of this that's missing
Please,
Go for it.
Member Karen.
because I don't think that the superintendent tried to change the remote learning plan. Sorry, Lily.
Yeah.
Without our permission. She made an emergency closure. So our issue is that we feel like that she made an emergency closure decision without involving us in any step of the process. It was just a made decision. There was no, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. So maybe the motion should be something like the superintendent can only make an emergency closure for 3 days, giving the school committee time to convene and get the correct information to make sure it was the right decision, or something like that. Because I don't want to take away her ability to make an emergency closure in the pandemic.
Right.
There are a lot of us dealing with our own pandemics and our own children and our own jobs. We may not be able to meet within 10 hours or 6 hours or 12 hours or whatever when the decision needs to be made. I want to give us 3 days to get it together and get an informed conversation going. So I don't want to take completely away her process. That feels unfair and unsafe. So there's got to be somewhere in the middle. We're talking about emergency closures. She didn't change the plan. The plan is still the same.
Correct.
She didn't take us completely out of phase 2. She made an emergency closure. So that's where I think the language is off for me. Not that I have a great suggestion on how to fix it, but
you kind of did. You kind of suggested something. Yeah, we'll move with that. I really appreciate your comments. I think that's an important distinction, and I'm glad you brought it up. Member Hollins is eager. Go ahead.
Well, I think the first part of this is defining what's an emergency. It's not clear to me there was an emergency. There was a recommendation based on escalating numbers in the city to close the school. I'm not sure in itself that's an emergency, because even the state guideline says you have to see if this is affecting transmission. And the other thing about that is parents have the option. You know, parents are all over the place on this. If we announce that there's an uptick in the numbers and parents may want to hold their children back, it's a choice to send your children to school. So I'm not sure. I think the first part was deciding that there was an emergency, and I'm not sure there was an emergency, but closing the school when there is an emergency, I think, is a different issue. Mm-hmm. It didn't seem like an emergency to me.
She was making a decision based on information that we didn't necessarily have.
Right.
How are we going to determine if she's making an emergency decision? That's an unrealistic expectation. We can disagree with her
even by the
decision,
state guidelines. The decision to close the schools has to do with thinking about whether there's transmission. So it doesn't.
I'm not saying that you're not wrong. I'm just saying it's not fair of us. If we point out that she needs to follow the state guidelines, that's the appropriate step. But it's not fair of us when the Board of Health and her got together and decided a decision needed to be made, or a recommendation at the least, that's I'm not a medical expert. I don't.
Well, that's a recommendation, but again, I'm not sure what rises to the level of being an emergency, because surely, anyway, I think it's a different issue, but I'll be quiet.
I think the mayor would like to be recognized, but she is on mute. Go ahead, Mayor.
I got off because it seemed like we were having little technical difficulties. So I put myself on mute, sorry. I think Susan's right. It is difficult to, one person's emergency isn't necessarily everybody's emergency. And I don't know what constitutes an emergency. I mean, I know what constitutes an emergency. If there's a fire, if there's a, you know, a roof falls in, there's a major blizzard that comes up, et cetera. Generally, we can plan for that more. Well, there are certain emergencies, so yes, we shouldn't take that away. We're talking about COVID specifics.
Right.
So I'm wondering, if we don't want a motion that says that's more like this, which is all changes to remote learning during the COVID-19 pandemic based on state guidelines must be approved by the school committee.
Interesting.
You're on mute now.
I'm thinking that you should read it to us again without the based on state guidelines clause.
Oh, well, I can do that too. I just figured we needed some frame of reference. And I agree on the sometimes lack of validity to the state guidelines. But all changes to remote learning must be approved by the school committee. All changes to remote learning during the COVID-19 pandemic must be approved by the school committee.
How do we feel about that? I think that
To
is.
ask this, can you read it one more time?
Yes, of course.
Was helping a kid.
Of course. Go
Happy
ahead.
to.
Read it one more time, Mayor Whittakertner.
All changes to remote learning during the COVID-19 pandemic must be approved by the school committee.
Is the intention that in an emergency that would even be the case? Like she literally can't make any emergency closures? Question mark.
I think if the superintendent were to say to us, this is an emergency, we need to meet, I mean, I'm quite certain that I would be available as necessary. And because it's important, so.
Before we discuss too much, I'm wondering if we should withdraw the motion made by Member Ekstrom.
Sure.
Thank you. Member Ekstrom's motion is withdrawn. As long as the second agrees. Mayor Whittakertner, you agree?
Yes.
And then Mayor Whittakertner, would you read that one more time?
Sure. All changes to remote learning during the COVID-19 pandemic must be approved by the school committee.
And would you feel comfortable at this point making that motion?
I would. I would also suggest that we might be able to either strengthen it or clarify it, although I think it's pretty declarative as it is, but
it's a good starting point.
But yeah, would be to add maybe something in there by the school committee and in consultation with the superintendent or something. So yes, I can make that motion for the purposes of discussion.
Okay, so that motion's been made by Mayor Whittakertner. Is there a second?
Second, Jean.
That's from Member Wall. Thank you both. And let's discuss. So the first discussion point was actually the mayor saying, and maybe we add, and this in consultation with the superintendent. And do we feel like we want to add that? Would anyone want to make that friendly amendment? I certainly would. I don't usually jump in, but I would say I certainly would.
Well, don't you think that that's our responsibility as a school committee member to use Member Holland's excellent research ability in making our decision on changing the COVID rules? I mean, I think that we can't legislate every single thing that could possibly happen, but it's our responsibility to try to think of everything when we're making the decision to close the schools. And we happen to have someone who does excellent research and keeps us all cognizant of what's happening. So I don't have a problem in taking the responsibility for helping make that decision.
Member Hollins, go ahead.
Well, my first thought was whether or not this motion removes from the superintendent the ability to act according to our guidelines in an emergency. But my second thought was this doesn't preclude a superintendent contacting the chair of the school committee saying the roof just, the roof in a COVID school just fell in, or somebody had this horrible something, and that still is in consultation with the school committee. So I just want to tell you, I don't have a problem with the motion. I think it keeps the superintendent's options open. I like the motion.
Thank you.
It could be further clarified by approved by the chair or school committee in consultation with.
Well, I liked your motion because after I thought about it, it's broad enough that it does allow consulting with the chair.
Yeah.
Yep.
I thought.
And it does not prevent acting on an emergency closure.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other discussion from school committee members?
Well, I wonder. So,
can you hear me?
Oh, it sounds like Member Johnson Musad, we can hear you. Member Ekstrom was just about to speak, and then I will recognize you.
Great.
Thank you.
So what we have agreed, and we've said numerous times, is that we would take consultation with the Board of Health, and we agreed with the MTA and the GEA to hear recommendations or with consultation from the Joint Labor Management, whatever. So I wonder if it should be something like all changes to remote learning during the COVID-19 pandemic will be determined, something like in consultation with Board of Health and the Joint Labor Management, JLMTA, or whatever it is.
And upon recommendation of the superintendent, right?
Yes, and upon recommendation of the superintendent by the school committee.
Okay, I think I would need to hear it in full. Are you able to repeat it so we can see if the mayor would recognize a friendly amendment?
Okay.
I can do that.
Thank you.
That all changes to remote learning during the COVID-19 pandemic will be determined by the school committee in consultation with the Board of Health and the Joint Labor Management Committee, and upon recommendation of the superintendent.
Thank you. Mayor Wiedegartner, would you accept that as a friendly amendment to your original motion?
I think so, yes.
Okay, so that's a yes. And the second was, I don't remember.
I was the second.
And would you accept that? Yes. So we'll move with the amended, friendly amended motion into more additional discussion with Member Johnson Musad to start.
Thank you, Chair Broyetti. I guess two things. First, maybe someone can clarify me. Are we still meeting on Thursday night? We were in the process of setting up a meeting for Thursday night.
We actually don't. We haven't gotten to that. That is unclear. So it's a good question.
Okay,
We
because
have not discussed that.
to me, I would be inclined to table this motion till Thursday if we were meeting on Thursday night, just because I would like to hear from the superintendent in person. And second, I think I understand the intent of the motion, but I think that the way that it is phrased kind of sounds like a change to a change to the brand of hand sanitizer we use could conceivably be, included under this. It kind of says all changes, so I think we have to be clear about what types of changes we're talking about, whether or not the schools are open. I don't know what other changes we might be wanting to
I
have
see. So you would want to clarify that we're specifically talking about changes to in-person instruction?
I guess changes to how instruction is delivered, maybe.
Okay.
I don't exactly have the language yet. I think that
Okay.
if we take, personally, I don't necessarily see a need to vote on this today. It doesn't to me sound like an emergency, like a roof is caved in and we have to vote on it, or we're not going to be able to get the roof covered in time, or something like that.
Okay.
To me, this does sound like something that could wait a few days for us to vote on.
Okay, and I'm going to say, I'm going to jump in and when I usually would not, and say, I think I disagree with that pretty strongly. We had the superintendent make a decision without consulting with the school committee, and I'm not certain that that decision was in the best interest of our students who were learning in person until yesterday. And I think that if we wait until Thursday, we're not addressing what I believe is the most problematic piece of this decision.
Which is that she did it without consulting the school committee?
The protocol for, yes, the protocol for making these decisions was not followed.
Exactly. And I think that I think it came up even in our athletics discussion. There are often, I imagine, between school committees and superintendents, questions about where that line is about who has the authority and when they should be making those calls. But unless we are actually voting on reopening this program between now and Thursday night, I don't see a need to vote on this during emergency session. I do see that there may be a need to clarify the committee's desires in terms of where that line is, but I don't see it as an emergency, and I would be more comfortable voting on it if I had a chance to hear from the superintendent in person.
Okay. And I would actually like to come out of this meeting having a motion that says we're going to put those kids back in school. I'll tell you that very clearly.
That's a different matter. I think if that were the motion on the table, I wouldn't be suggesting moving it to Thursday.
Right. And what you missed when you weren't with us is that we're proceeding in a very measured way through a number of motions. And this is, I think, the third that we've made to move forward with how we're going to respond to the emergency closure decision yesterday. So I don't think our work is done yet. And I know that you missed it, and I recognize that. So I want to see if we can move through this motion and it to a point where we could actually make a vote today. I'm going to recognize Mayor Reed Gardner.
Yes, I fairly strongly disagree with that as well. With respect to Member Johnson Musad, he did miss quite a bit of the discussion and how we came to this motion. So he's correct. It would be nice to be able to hear from the superintendent. She certainly had a choice to be here and chose differently based on whatever needs she had at the time. But I think it's important that this body address this at this meeting.
Okay. Other comments, questions, discussion?
Madam Chair, may I be recognized, please?
I don't know who you are, but absolutely not. Only the school committee discusses during this portion of the meeting. Thank you.
I'd like to move that we table this motion till Thursday night.
There's a motion on the floor.
Yeah, we're voting on the motion that's already on the floor. It seems like it would be helpful for Susan Farber to repeat the motion to us.
Yes. The motion is that all changes to remote learning during the COVID-19 pandemic will be determined by the school committee in consultation with the Board of Health and Joint Labor Management Committee and upon recommendation of the superintendent.
Thank you. Member Hollins, go ahead.
I believe a motion to table is not debatable.
You didn't make a motion. Did he make a motion to table? I
Yeah,
thought he
he
made a
did.
new motion.
No, I made a motion to table.
Oh, okay. So, okay.
I
Was
will
there a second?
say, having heard Glenn pointing out that, all changes to remote learning could be as simple as, we want to use this hand sanitizer. That's a valid concern or
Okay, but we have to
thing.
deal with the motion to table before we discuss further. The
All right.
motion to table is on the floor. Is there a second? I'm not hearing a second. I'll go one more time. Is there a second to that motion? Okay, so we'll move forward with discussing the motion that is on the table. Member Ekstrom, why don't you go ahead with your original thought?
I think Glenn pointing out that remote learning is a little bit too broad, and we are really talking about the delivery, and that was part of what I was struggling with. It's not the delivery of remote learning or all changes to the delivery of education during the COVID-19 pandemic. I don't know. It's
delivery of instruction, mode of instruction.
That could be. Member Hollins, you're the wordsmith. What do you think about that?
I need to hear it again. I'm lost in thought.
All changes to the delivery of learning during the COVID-19 pandemic must be approved by blah, 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 or will be determined by.
I think it's too broad. Delivery of learning could be how the teacher is teaching. I think what was before that, which was pretty specific to in-person learning, which gets at the issue of school closures, was better than delivery of instruction, which can include lots of things.
So, Member Ekstrom, would you agree that it's really about in-person learning?
Yes.
Okay. And does that make the motion too narrow if we were to add that at the beginning?
Probably.
Susan Farber, could you try to read it for us with that caveat at the beginning? I'm asking you a lot of you today. I'm so sorry.
That's fine. I'm not sure what has been substituted. It has been suggested that delivery of instruction, and then that was pushed off.
Yes. So let's try in-person. Any changes to in-person learning?
During the COVID-19 pandemic?
Sure. So it would read right now that all changes to in-person learning during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that's all changes to in-person learning during the COVID-19 pandemic will be determined by the school committee in consultation with the Board of Health and Joint Labor Management Committee and upon recommendation of the superintendent.
Thank you. And would that be acceptable to the maker of the motion, who was Member Ekstrom, I believe? Is that right? Or
yes.
Well, me originally.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Mayor Wiedegartner, is that an acceptable, friendly amendment to your motion?
Let me hear it again.
Of course.
Sorry.
All changes to in-person learning during the COVID-19 pandemic will be determined by the school committee in consultation with the Board of Health and Joint Labor Management Committee and upon recommendation of the superintendent. If it would be useful once we finally settle on a motion, I could paste it into chat if that would help folks to be able to see it.
Thank you.
If that's acceptable, putting it in chat might be helpful. I am a little bit concerned about it, only because, once again, it needs the remote learning piece in it, I'm fairly certain, for the simple reason that all changes to in-person learning is perhaps a little too broad, because we're going to have in-person learning. I mean, right now, it looks very doubtful that we'll have any in-person learning. I'd have to mull that over, so I'm happy to hear from others on that motion before I do it. It's not far from what my intention was when I made this, but I do want to caution that the better motions are those that are simpler.
Okay. Thank you. Member Hollins.
Following up on the mayor's last statement of the best motions are simpler, I think the point, if I'm understanding this, is that you want the decisions that are changing who's in school and who isn't to come to the school committee.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think upon the recommendation of the superintendent, we wouldn't be acting without that. But everything else that's there about consultation, that's all superintendent work, really. The superintendent's recommendation to the school committee, I just don't want to get too involved in the work.
Sure.
I would just eliminate that.
Can you
It
say
just
what you started with about everything coming to the school committee when, I forget exactly how you phrased it.
When there's a change to, I don't know what I said, but I think the point is that these changes, in this instance, there was no connection with the school committee, apparently, that the decisions come to the school committee to make a change. I'm just saying that the parts of this motion that talk about with consultation, I would remove, because that should be part of what the superintendent brings.
Right.
And to me, it's superintendent work. And we would hear that from maybe that's, anyway, something about that
I hear
feels
what you're
wrong.
saying.
Thank you.
Is there a suggestion for making the motion simpler?
I'd like to respond to Susan's most recent comment.
Okay, go ahead.
We're here in this meeting, which we have been in for almost 2 hours, because the superintendent chose not to involve the school committee or make an extra effort to involve the school committee. So I think it has to be clear who gets consulted and why.
Well, and I think we have that with something simpler as something as simple as a motion to bring all the motion that the superintendent bring all decision making related to pandemic instruction to the school committee.
And so then my question becomes, what I read to you all earlier that we had in, because I'm not trying to put a kibosh on anything, but we have agreed that the Joint Labor Management Group would be advisory to the school committee, not advisory to the superintendent.
Correct. That
I
is
don't think
correct.
we should abdicate our responsibility here. That's the whole point of this motion. We're trying not to.
And Susan Farber, did you put the motion in the chat? No, I'm not sure what is in the chat, but that's not.
I did not yet, because
Okay.
I can paste the current motion, but it
Please.
seemed to be in flux already.
Yeah,
But,
let's
okay, I will
paste
do
the
that.
current motion and know what we're starting from.
Okay. All right. And just to let everyone know,
Yes.
I have a hard stop right before 1.
Yes, so she's only with us
Okay,
for a
will
few more
do. Here
minutes.
comes the paste.
Thank you. As soon as it's in there, I will read it to everyone.
And I apologize, my chat function is not working right
It
now.
happens.
I'm still
I
working on it.
understand. In the interest of time, you could actually just read it to us. Oh, here it is. Okay. Mayor Rita Gardner moved that all changes to in-person learning during the COVID-19 pandemic will be determined by the school committee in consultation with Board of Health and Joint Labor Management Committee and upon recommendation of the superintendent. And Jean Wall seconded. I think, I don't know, now I kind of think it's okay.
It gets to the heart of, I think, what this whole discussion has been about.
Well, let's see if there's more discussion before we move to a vote.
Sure. No, I understand.
Any
I
further
know I'm the
discussion?
person who raised the concern originally about the language, but I think often these motions are not without context. I'm sure the superintendent will listen to this recording. People will understand kind of the intent of the committee, even if the exact wording is, you know, could be interpreted a different way.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments? I actually think we're ready to move to a vote. Member Johnson Musad, are you able to do at this point a roll call vote, or do you want Member Ekstrom to keep going?
I am thrilled to resume that duty.
Okay.
I am thrilled to have you resume it.
Member Karen,
Yes.
Vice Chair Ekstrom,
Yes, I was so happy to be relinquished that I faced.
Member Hollins.
Yes.
I'm still getting to my checklist, so this is from memory so far, you guys. Secretary Johnson Musad, I am a yes. Chair Proietti.
I'm going to abstain.
Member Wall.
Yes.
Mayor Rita Gardner.
Yes.
Chair Proietti, I know I just voted, but I actually meant to abstain, but I just kind of got caught up in things. May I abstain retroactively?
I don't have a problem with that as long as none of the other members of the school committee have a problem with that.
Fine with me.
Yeah, I think we're good. So we have 2 abstentions, but the motion carries. Is that correct?
Yes, the motion carries.
Thank you. Okay. We are just a few minutes before the hard stop for our recording secretary. I do think there remains on the table an issue of a decision being made that has impacted our most vulnerable learners in the district. And we should quickly look at whether or not we want to address that now. As it stands, our in-person learning is currently suspended. Before the holiday break, there remain 4 days of potential in-person instruction, which would be this Thursday and Friday, the 17th and the 18th, and then next Monday and Tuesday, the 21st and 22nd. Is there an interest in, at this point, the committee making a motion to change that?
I'll make a motion so that we can discuss it.
Please.
Motion to rescind the, no, motion to return those students previously to in-person teaching. Those students previously engaged in in-person teaching to in-person teaching. That's not very good.
Well, and we would need to include the staff and teachers as well.
Right. So somebody else make a motion then.
I guess the motion would be, I see. I move, well, wait, I'm not going to make this motion because I'm not even sure where I stand on it. So someone
All right,
wants, I
I'll
mean,
try
I don't
again.
think someone should make this motion unless they actually want to do it. I don't think we should do it for the purposes of discussion.
I think we have to do it for the purposes of discussion. Anyone disagrees, feel free. And
I do think it's important that we have a motion on the table for the purpose of discussion in this instance specifically.
so motion to return students to in-person instruction.
And staff.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the motion. Does anyone want to second that motion? I'm not hearing anyone.
Well, I'll second it for purpose of further discussion.
Okay, so second from Member Hollins. And
Thank
let's
you.
discuss. Member Hollins, go ahead.
First, I feel terrible for these families and these particular 39 students because I think everybody in the state agrees these are the most affected students by remote learning because they can't learn remotely. It's almost impossible. And second, in reading the state guidelines, it says that when closing off this instruction, we should at least have an opinion on whether continuing the instruction is likely to affect transmission. So I don't feel like I have that information. And third, there's a confusion on how long this is. The notice says one thing and another comment says 3 days. So at least I could, and I don't know where the staff stand. The whole thing is a confusion, but I feel terrible we're in this situation with these students. So if it was safer it's safe for them to come back until there's a decision that being there would likely affect transmission. I could support that, except no matter what we do, it's going to be more confusion. That's my thought.
Member Ekstrom is raising her hand.
Member Ekstrom, go ahead.
So I go back and forth on this because, yes, these are most vulnerable students. We've also now thrown in more confusion and then for the students. And the teachers also have, moving in and out and not having a stable, I don't know, I'll say work schedule because they don't know where they're going to be from day to day is sort of in my head. And the kids not knowing if they're going back or forth or whatever the case may be is not stable probably now through Christmas. It could be that on Thursday we look at whatever numbers and decide that yes, it would make sense that we close now or not. I have no idea. And I don't think that anyone else knows that. And so would I like to see the kids back in the schools? Absolutely. Would I like to see teachers back in schools? Yes. Everybody. I'd like to see them all back in schools. Are we making a wise decision that is providing the best education for our students, given that these are people who are already struggling and now they've gone in person and they're coming out again? And then they'd go back in and then come out for 2 weeks again. I don't know that it's worth the 4 days of education as an exercise. I don't know that there would be a strong enough change or argument to say yes, we should go back in until we meet on Thursday and make a decision. I don't know. I'm really go back and forth.
Okay. Member Wall, please, and then Member Hollins.
I think that in view of the impending snowstorm and for 4 days and the confusion that has all been wrought by this whole thing, it's better to not have the children go back to school until after the holidays.
Fair enough. Member Wall, you need to push record. You can do it because Susan Farber is going to leave us very shortly, and we will record the remaining portion of this public meeting. You got it? And what I'm going to try to remember to do, and someone else can help me, is remember to tell you to stop it before I end the meeting, because I think that will make sure that we actually get the recording. You're talking, but I can't hear what you're saying. You're on mute. You're still on mute. I don't know what you're saying.
We'll also have the
Are you talking to
recording from-
Member Wall?
I'm talking to Member Wall. I want to make sure you have the you're recording. Okay.
I don't
Excellent.
see it. I'm sorry. Usually when the recording begins, there it goes. Okay.
Okay. Yes, I do see it. Member Hollins, go ahead.
About the motion, I agree there's a snowstorm. It's confusing in and out. It's confusing. But I do think there's still confusion on how long this goes on. And is it possible our motion could say that that the closure for these 39 students be limited to whether it's 3 or 4 days as per the superintendent's clarification? And until we have input on the likelihood that in-school learning would impact transmission according to state guidelines or something like that, can we wrap
Okay.
how long this is?
Hold on, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. I am not sure why there are people who are not members of the school committee putting things in the chat. It is not appropriate for a public meeting. If we were meeting in person, you would absolutely not to be able to provide us with information at this point, and that needs to end. Thank you. To your point, Member Hollins, I am wondering if it sounds like our better course of action, now that we've talked this out, is to rescind that motion, take that motion away, whatever the word is, and instead agree that we will meet on Thursday night as we'd originally planned to get more information.
It would make me feel like this was clear if we contained what this emergency closure period is, figure out what to do after that at our next meeting. But right now, it sounds like it's anywhere from 3 to 17 days.
Yeah, I don't know without the superintendent here that we have that information. And I'm cognizant of the fact that we're not protecting our own integrity in our business if we do exactly what was already done, which is make a decision without having all the information and the right people making the decision. I'm conscious of that.
So we'll bring this up again on Thursday.
I think after talking it out and trying to do all of the actions we could do today, that's where I've landed, but I'd like to hear from other folks. Glenn, Member Johnson-Musad, go ahead.
I guess that the same is true if we reopened the schools, that parents could choose not to send their children back if they thought it would be too disruptive for them to kind of be in and out like this.
Correct. Remote it remains in the plan, always an option for any student.
Right. So, I mean, in that way, opening for 4 days gives parents more options. But I do like the idea of waiting for Thursday for more context as well.
Well, sure. And with a snowstorm,
when is the snowstorm due to come in?
Wednesday into Thursday. So
yeah.
By Thursday, we would have a lot more opportunity to get the right information in front of us. Should we just vote on the motion and see where it goes?
Well, I moved to table to Thursday night.
Okay. Is there we should take a vote on that? There's a motion.
Need a second.
Table. We need a second. A motion to table this motion until Thursday night. Is there a second?
Second.
And from Member Wall. And let's move to a vote on the tabling.
Can we hear the motion one more time?
Yes, I think motion. It's in the chat,
yes.
Isn't it?
The motion is to return students and staff to in-person instruction.
And yes, and that was from Susan Ekstrom with the second by Member Hollins. So let's, Member Johnson Musad, roll call vote on the tabling, please.
Member Karen,
Yes.
Vice Chair Ekstrom,
Yes.
Member Hollins. Did you say something?
She's on mute.
Yes.
Is that as a yes? Okay. Secretary Johnson Musad, I am a yes. Chair Poyetti,
Abstain.
Member Wall,
Yes.
Mayor Wiedegardner.
Yes.
The motion carries with one abstention.
Thank you. Okay. I think that may be a logical stopping point, but I would entertain any further discussion from the school committee if people have stuff more that they would like to say on this issue. Okay. Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh, wait, actually,
Oh, Member Karen, please go ahead.
no, it's Ekstrom.
Oh, Member Ekstrom.
We tabled it, so never mind.
We tabled it, yes. So you'd have to make a new motion, but you're welcome to discuss briefly. It has been 2 hours.
So, thank you. The changes, when we make a change, we did make an agreement with the union to provide X number of days notice prior to return to in-person. And I can't remember the number of days, but if we,
Okay.
on Thursday were to make a decision to return to in-person, I think it's at least 2 days.
Okay.
Um,
Well, we can get that information for
Friday,
Thursday.
Monday, Tuesday. Yep. Okay, just wanted to.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any further Member Hollins, go ahead.
Sorry, for the continued discussion, could we ask for clarification of how many nursing personnel we have employed and how many students are going to school in each building?
Sure.
And
what I would recommend is
that would be helpful.
Yep. So for Thursday's meeting, if school committee members would actually email me, even if you've already emailed it to me, email me again. This is what I need in terms of information or what I would like to have for information for Thursday. And I will make that request of the superintendent. Okay, so it looks like we're done with the discussion, and I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
That was everyone, so that's a unanimous motion. And put someone down as a second. And let's do a roll call vote, please.
Member Karen,
Yes.
Vice Chair Ekstrom,
Yes.
Member Hollins,
Yes.
Secretary Johnson Musad, I'm a yes. Chair Poyetti,
Yes.
Member Wall,
Yes.
Mayor Wiedegardner.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay, we are adjourned at 1:02 p.m. I want to thank you all and remind the school committee that we do have an executive session scheduled. I will give you all a 10-minute break. Member Wall.